Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Golden Spotlight. This is 22S Radio. Now, at this time, I'd like my guest to please introduce himself.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Rene Trevino. I'm an assistant professor of English here at Cal State Long Beach.
Excellent. So, one of the things I like to do when I have my guests is have them, share their stories from the beginning. Tell me, what was life growing up? Did you grow up with siblings?
I did grow up with siblings, one older sister, one younger sister. And maybe the sibling aspect not as interesting as where I grew up. So I grew up about 3 miles from the U.S.-Mexico border in a small town of 2,000, Sullivan City, Texas. And it was a very interesting place to grow up. A lot of encounters with police, border patrol, as a young kid growing up. So it was interesting, to say the least.
And what was that like, the different environment?
It's hard to say in terms of what to compare it to. I didn't have really anything to compare it to. It's in the lower Rio Grande Valley, so deep South Texas. People often say they're from the South, and I say, well, you're not actually from the South, because I'm from as far south as you can get before you're actually into Mexico. So without much to compare it to, I mean, it's kind of an isolating place, but there is a pretty strong focus on community around there. So the different towns do kind of see themselves as part of a larger whole. So on the one hand, you're isolated from anything north of San Antonio, Texas, but it still feels like its own kind of place.
And so walk us through, what was K-12 like?
K through 12, pretty standard. I was a decent student compared to most, I guess. I wasn't a stellar student. I wouldn't say that I valued education that highly at that point in my life. Other things, of course, like any kind of teen or preteen, other things were more important. Basketball, hanging out with friends, doing all those kind of normal kid stuff. So it wasn't an emphasis of mine, education. Higher education really didn't come even into my mind until probably I was my late junior year or even my senior year, when my friends and I started finally to have the conversation of when and where and if even we should go to college. So it wasn't the case that I was groomed from a very early age to be an academic. Not the case at all. It wasn't until relatively late in my life that I even became a good student. And that is its own kind of long and winding story. So it was a standard school experience. I managed to graduate maybe 17th or 18th out of 800. But you could consider the school that I went to, my high school, underperforming school or underachieving school. So it's hard to say, if that was an accomplishment necessarily. There's a lot of factors that went into those rankings. Did you show up to school? People were dealing with some real life situations that kept them out of school. And fortunately, I didn't have those necessarily. So almost by sheer virtue of being there, by being somewhat interested, especially when it came to writing and English, that was my preferred subject. Then I managed to do well enough in high school to get on a scholarship to a local college, the University of Texas Pan American, which has now become the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley.
Oh, and how did you reach that decision, what school you wanted to go to?
It was just a matter of what's close and what's free. So this was the University Scholars Scholarship, and it was essentially 4 years, free books, free tuition, etc., all fees paid. So it was a free ride to a local school. I could stay close to family. I didn't really have grand aspirations, didn't necessarily have a vision for what my life was going to be, what profession I wanted to enter. It was all kind of haphazard, but the decision was kind of made for me when my scores were good enough, my grades were good enough that I was able to get this university scholarship, which I promptly lost after one semester in college, which we can get to shortly.
Sure. Did you get to start off with friends?
You mean
In college?
college? Yeah, somewhat. So, you know, I had maybe, let's say, a group of 10. Half decided to go elsewhere. UT Austin was a big draw for students in South Texas. UT San Antonio was another one. But, you know, about half of us stayed together. So a core group of maybe 3 or 4 friends that I entered college with, but we weren't in the same major. You know, so we weren't necessarily seeing ourselves as following the same career path. So it wasn't, and that's probably part of the reason why I didn't do so well that first semester, is I didn't necessarily have a network of people that were encouraging me to go to class, to stay on top of my studies, etc. And you know, there's a whole side story about being in a rock band that, you know, took the focus away from school. So I had friends, but they weren't the type of friends, they're great friends, but they weren't the type of friends to say, hey, don't you have class today? You know, when the choice was go to class or, you know, rehearse music or write music or something. They were going to side with me when I made the arguments in favor of, why don't we not go to class, and why don't we try to work on the song, or why don't we try to do this, or why don't we brainstorm band names for 2 hours instead of going to class. So not the most productive use of our time, but that's just what I felt compelled to do at that time in my life.
So what kind of venues did you get to perform at?
Quite a few, and looking back at you know, my time in a rock band, I was too young to be playing the venues that people let me into. I was the oldest at one point, 18, so right out of high school, first semester of college, and the other bandmates were 17, 16 even. And we would go to these smoky bars and play for these kind of rough characters there in South Texas, and so we played the bar scene mostly. You know, we played a couple of restaurants a few times, and you know, we spanned a good kind of geographical range when it came to playing shows. So you know, we got around a little bit, and it was mostly late night bar shows that, you know, we weren't even old enough to drink at the time, but there we were playing for people, you know, who themselves, of course, were drinking. Right? So it was an interesting time, and you can see how that could be kind of distracting when it comes time to put the time in for homework and for study and for even planning out your degree, or, you know, all those kind of normal college activities that help you advance toward your degree. Those weren't necessarily things that I was interested in.
And how did you reach the decision as to what major you wanted?
Well, the guitar playing, I was a guitar player, it tied into my first choice of being a music major. And the only reason I wanted to do it, of course, I said, well, if I'm going to go to school, I can learn how to be a better guitarist. It seemed to make sense until, of course, I was very young and naive, until I realized that it was going to be a much more difficult path, the music major, than simply just going and playing my guitar. So, of course, I had to learn classical guitar, which I was somewhat familiar with from playing mariachi music, but my thing was rock guitar. So that was a departure, and that was very challenging. As classical guitarists know, it's a very demanding form of music. And of course, I had to deal with, for the first time, really, music theory, music notations, singing, which I hadn't done. So it was a very kind of arduous major, where you did a lot of the music classes during the semester, both semesters, and then in the summer you would do some general education. So it was a 5-year program. It was very difficult for me, and the more I thought of it, so, you know, what am I going to do with this degree once I'm done? I didn't really have a vision for that. So after a semester, I decided, looking back, I really should have just changed majors then and there, but I decided to stop going to school altogether. So I went for 1 semester, quit school, lost the scholarship, and then for 3 years kind of went on this journey of being in the band, and then eventually being forced to take a real job, so to speak, to pay the bills, and then ultimately find my way back to school with a different major, then a business major for another semester, then another change to an English major. And don't know why I was so hesitant to start as an English major when that was my best subject in high school, and I enjoyed it, and I could kind of get by with writing and with analyzing on instinct, and even though I wasn't that great of a writer. So I should have done that all along, but on the other hand, the journey to get there still was worth it, and taught me a lot of valuable lessons. So eventually I made it back to school, back as an English major, and from then on I became what we would consider, yes, a good student. You know, someone who was very diligent about study and, you know, getting things in on time, and trying to do my best, and all the rest of that. But it took a very long time for me to mature to get to that place, and it takes a long time in general just to be disciplined enough to do that type of schoolwork, you know, to do what it takes. And I needed, in total, 6 years in my BA to get it done, but it got done eventually, even while working, you know, a side job.
Did you get to be involved on campus?
No, not necessarily. Even from in high school, school spirit wasn't a thing for me necessarily. So, you know, I took the approach in college just to get my work done. Of course, that's after I got my act together. My approach was the work first. So the question I would pose to myself, and it's not necessarily, you know, the healthiest thing. I think being involved on campus is important and can really be satisfying for some people. But for me, the question, even into grad school later, was what's coming up next in terms of what's graded. You know, what am I going to be graded on? And that's what came first. And it's been that way in my life now for over 10 years. You know, what's coming up next? What am I going to be judged on? And that's what I did. So school spirit wasn't a thing, and it probably also, part of it was that we didn't have a football team, and there wasn't, at least in my eyes, not much to do on campus. But I'm sure if I had looked for opportunities, I would have found them. But my focus was working and, you know, what's graded, what's next. So that never-ending to-do list. And so I didn't want to necessarily add a campus activity to that to-do list.
Most would say that midterms and finals are the most stressful times in a student's life. Tell us the strategies you use to succeed.
In midterms and in finals, it's been, you know, now I've written more midterms and finals than I've taken in the last couple of years, so it's hard to say, but my approach was to, of course, take notes in class, get clarification whenever I felt I needed it from the professor. So, you know, some students are shy when it comes to talking to their professors, but there really are a lot of benefits to getting that face-to-face time and getting some clarification on things, and to prepare as much as possible to you know, go over any kind of notes. And then once I'm in the room, it was just a matter of writing it and getting it down first, and then going back and seeing what kind of sense I can make out of an answer, because you need to have something at least on paper. And that's the approach I take in my own writing today, is it needs to be there first in order for it to be shaped. So just get it out. And it doesn't need to be perfect the first time, but of course, if you're taking a midterm, you're taking a final, you need to take a little bit of time to shape the answer, because you need to demonstrate, of course, that you understand the material, but you also have to make sure that you're addressing the actual question and not simply, you know, writing off topic. So that was my approach, kind of the standard simple approach.
Tell us the importance of mentors.
Without mentors, I wouldn't have gone to graduate school, probably. And, you know, the level of mentorship wasn't necessarily that involved when I was getting my BA, but still there were professors that at least took the time, you know, to bring me into their office and to ask, have you thought of graduate school? You know, they saw, for whatever reason, they saw some promise. And if you hadn't ever asked yourself that question, having someone ask that question of you makes a big difference. So when they start to introduce the idea into your mind that you're capable, that you're worthy, that you have potential, then, at least in my case, that got me thinking, well, maybe I do. And is that something that I would like to pursue? And I did well, of course, in my English classes. And it was my English professors that first, introduced that idea to me of going on and going to graduate school and pursuing English as a profession, because if you're going to grad school, you're probably going to at least end up in a teaching job, although the job market is pretty diverse for English majors. But once you go on, beyond the BA, it's probably going to lead you to a teaching job. But that really helped, having someone sit me down and say, you are displaying some potential, and it's worth at least entertaining the idea of going on and doing something more than the BA.
You had mentioned, scholarships and stuff. Tell us, I know that for most students, they should think early on, the planning that goes into going to graduate school and the funding, and I've heard of programs where they'll pay it off when you get to your career and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a big conversation. What I would say about scholarships and about funding is don't be like me, because I told you the story of going into my BA and it was kind of, well, it's close and they're going to pay, and that was it. So I was leaving it up to the school counselors, for instance, to kind of whose job it was to place us to do that work for me. But by doing the bare minimum, you'll receive the bare minimum. So I would advise students, of course, to look for opportunities, to be very proactive in looking for these opportunities, because graduate school is very expensive. And if you are going into a master's program, it's going to take a minimum 2 years. If you go on to do your PhD, it's going to take another 5 usually at minimum. So for 7 years, you are out of the workforce. You're not making money the same way your peers might be. And even if you get a teaching assistant position, you're not making a lot of money. So you're at risk of taking on debt while not making a lot of money, and you're doing that for 7 years. So to have your graduate school funded, very, very important. And most schools, most programs will provide you with that funding, but of course they have kind of their standard funding, but you can always find other funding sources to kind of offset those costs, because while some schools can be very generous, other schools that don't have the same type of budget, they provide what they can, but it's certainly not going to make your life comfortable for 7 years. So being very proactive will really help with that. Onto your other point about the public service loan forgiveness program, right? So this is the government program that is in some peril at the moment. There's some question whether or not it will remain. But what it did for some people, in my case, it hasn't necessarily helped, because according to them, I make too much money, and this is all laughable to me, but I make too much money, and then I don't have any children. So all the ways that I would benefit from the program don't apply to me, but I do know that it is helping some people. So the idea is that if you work for a public institution, then the government, after 10 years of you paying on time your school loans, they'll pay the remainder. So there are some programs in place at the moment that can help people who take on a substantial amount of debt while trying to pursue an advanced degree, and who eventually end up in a public career.
Oh, cool. Everybody has that one subject that they either disliked or they just struggled with the most. What was that subject for you?
That subject for me, aside from music theory, was accounting. So the reason I went back as a business major before becoming an English major was because I was working in retail management. So I worked for Best Buy for 5 years, started as a seasonal employee one December, and eventually hustled my way up to manager of the cell phone department. So I thought I could go back, get a business degree, then apply some of the same lessons, right? They would go hand in hand. Come to find out, I couldn't get a hold on accounting, credits and debits and all the rest of it. I'm sure if it was presented to me now, I'd do better with it. But at the time, it just didn't make too much sense to me. And so I found that aspect of the business world somewhat intimidating and just not for me, and that's partly why I left the business major after only a semester. So that wasn't my strong suit in the classroom, but I did have success with it outside the classroom, in the real world, so I like to tell myself that that's a victory of some kind.
We always hear today that, that it's stressed that it's great to be bilingual. Tell us about the importance of being bilingual.
Very important, especially regionally. Right? It's important nationally, but it's important if you're going to be an educator in regions where that's an absolute necessity. So where I grew up, you would think, being so close to the US-Mexico border, that there would be an emphasis on being bilingual. For some families, that was an emphasis. For others, there wasn't. That was the case with my family because there was actually a stigma around speaking Spanish. So there was a high immigrant population, and for whatever reason, there was an attitude in that region at that time, so I can't speak to how it is now. I haven't been living there for quite some time, but at the time there was an attitude that English was the way out. You didn't want to necessarily associate with being Mexican, with speaking Spanish only. You were looked down on if that was the case. English was your ticket out. So I only picked up Spanish from Spanish class, from friends, from just hanging out with people, and just from living in the culture. It wasn't taught to me by my parents, both of whom speak Spanish. And in part, it tells me that they bought in, at least somewhat, to that idea, that if we want them to succeed, it needs to be an English-speaking household. And, it's unfortunate, but that was the social reality of the time. And so I've since done other things to try to supplement my language learning, Rosetta Stone and some other things, and that's kind of come to bear on my research, reading things in Spanish and looking at them in translation, etc., has really helped me. Could I do more in that if I was more fluent in Spanish? Sure. And it happens to be also the case in the classroom that I teach English texts, being in the English department. Of course, I teach pre-1900 American literature, so the Mexican-American, Hispanic experience comes up, of course, from time to time, but we're only reading texts in English. So I feel somewhat limited in my ability in that sense in terms of the bilingual teaching and also research, but I have enough of a background in it to where I've made use of it in my life. But I would say to those who are thinking about, especially teaching in a region where, like California, like South Texas, where I'm from, absolutely necessary. It's going to help you bridge the gap with students. Right? It's going to help you form bonds with students. And it's going to make you a role model for students, right? For students that see you in front of the classroom and realize, even if it's not a one-on-one mentorship, that they can do what you're doing because someone like them made it, quote unquote.
Tell us what led to the PhD.
So to the PhD, I got my master's at the University of Arkansas. So this is Northwest Arkansas, Fayetteville, Arkansas. And that was an interesting experience coming from South Texas, very different culture, a very different South even, right? Even though it's not as far south. Culturally, it's a very different South. But it was pleasant enough and it was fine enough. But I wanted to go to a better institution for my PhD. I wanted to upgrade. Right? So going from UTPA to Arkansas, which is a Research One school, was an upgrade. I wanted to upgrade again to go into the PhD. And so figuring that I'd want to go to the best schools in Texas that were close to family, etc., Texas A&M and UT Austin were my two choices. Got into A&M and they offered me a good package in terms of funding, so I took that. And it was more so, when it came time to decide, finishing the master's degree, I did well with that, and it's like, do I want to get a job locally, or do I want to continue? Do I want to see how far I can take this? And so I did want to take that challenge, but I wanted to do it somewhere else. So I went to Texas A&M in College Station, Texas, another South, right? So there's all these regions in the South that are very different culturally. So I got a kind of a taste of all different things, the deep South Texas culture, Northwest Arkansas, and East Texas. So, a lot of growing up and being educated really in the South, so coming over here has been another kind of change for me, but that's what led me to the PhD, and I think in some ways, sibling rivalry. My older sister is a Cornell PhD, so she already won that unspoken competition, but there might have been some of that, right? Thinking that, you know, she had done very well, and she is doing very well for herself, by the way, moving to California. So here we come, the Trevino family. But I saw her, and I saw her example, I saw how well she was doing, so that in part inspired me to do it, and also I just wanted to take the test myself to see if I could do it.
Cool, cool. So your siblings, did you guys enter like different fields, or how did it go?
Yeah, we certainly did. So my older sister, she is going to be joining faculty at City of Hope Cancer Research Center, not too far from here. So she got her PhD in physiology, so she does research. So she's in the STEM field, basically. And my younger sister was a master's, she does counseling, so she does behavioral counseling. So yeah, we all ended up doing different things eventually. So not so much a one-to-one competition, but still, right, siblings, what are you going to do?
Cool, cool. Tell us about the different jobs leading up to where you are today.
So I mentioned I had the Best Buy job, so I basically worked every department imaginable, worked the Black Fridays, the so-called Black Friday sale days, very hectic, crazy times. I actually enjoyed my time working for Best Buy. I did that for 5 years, but it came to the point where I didn't want to do that job when I started my master's. So I felt that I could multitask well enough while getting my bachelor's to where I could still hold the job, and it really helped out, you know, making decent money for being as young as I was, etc. In graduate school, though, there does especially in the summers, it comes time where you say, well, money's a little tight, I need to do something extra. I worked at a snow cone stand, right? So raspas basically in Northwest Arkansas. I worked as a food delivery driver, is one thing that I did. I worked at amphitheaters, so setting up stages and backstage areas for music acts. So I did that in South Texas, and I did that in Arkansas. I did a number of those kind of odd jobs just to make a little extra money in the summer, and each one of them kind of taught me different things and had helped to professionalize me. Because one of the things I think, you can go through grad school, which is in some ways an isolating experience. You can go through it and then you come out and now you're expected to be a professor, right? It's your profession now. And in some cases we don't have the best training to actually enter a profession. We have the subject material, of course, we're making our way towards being an expert in the subject material, but all of the other things that go into being a professor, the committee work, working with students, working with your colleagues, collaborating on projects, etc. I learned a lot of how to do that from the real world jobs that I had. Without those, I don't know if I would be as professional as I am or as I've come to be. So they all helped out, and they were all in their own ways kind of fun diversions from the grad school life, which can be a grind, as some of your listeners know very well.
What was your parents' reactions to each of you and your siblings' major choices?
It's hard to say. Their parenting approach, if I can call it that, was essentially what you think is best for you is best for you. So when I made the choice to go to UTPA, they were fine with it. So that's good. You know, you're going to be close. They of course wanted me to go to college. Neither one of them finished. My dad went to college but didn't finish, and my mom only finished high school. So of course they wanted that for us. And my sister was at St. Mary's in San Antonio, Texas at the time, very prestigious school, so they saw that as a path we were all going to take. When I quit a semester later, they were okay with that too. Probably with somewhere in the back of their mind knowing that I would be fine eventually. But they allowed me the freedom to make that choice myself, and there really wasn't any kind of pushback or arguments or big family blow up at the Pizza Hut or something, because that's where I told them, that's where I broke the news to everyone at Pizza Hut. But it wasn't a thing. It was, this is what I want to do, I want to play music, I'm going to try this, and now let's eat some pizza. And that was fine with them, to their credit. And then when I decided to come back, of course, they were happy for me that I decided to get back on track. And then I said, well, now I'm moving to Arkansas. They were fine with that too. So I'm moving to College Station. They were fine with that too. So they've been hands off, but they've been supportive nonetheless throughout. So it wasn't ever a case that they want to interfere with what we want to do. If I'm sure if it was completely irrational, then I would have had some kind of lecture coming my way, but that wasn't ever the case. With the exception of wanting to quit school, that was really the only kind of questionable decision that I made. But it still, in some ways, it worked out. It gave me time to mature and to actually get into the right frame of mind to come back and be successful, whereas before I wasn't.
So after those other jobs, like the setting up stage and all that, what happened after?
After that, those were kind of just summer jobs, and then I was finishing my PhD and had to go on the job market. So there's different ways to approach it. You can finish your dissertation and then go on the job market very confident in you having finished. Right? So there's an appeal to that from prospective employers that say, okay, this person has it together, the dissertation's done, they're going to finish, because there aren't that many jobs at the moment. The job market is pretty light. And so search committees want to know that you're a sure bet. They don't want to spend all their time and all the resources and all the energy selecting someone who's at risk of not finishing. That's one thing. What I did, I made the opposite kind of gamble, and I decided to focus most, if not all of my attention, my final year on the job market, and then to finish the dissertation once I had a better sense of if I had any job offers. And with the understanding, of course, that my committee, if the job offer was good enough, they weren't going to hold me back, because the dissertation would be good, it wouldn't be great. But that was a trade-off I was willing to make, of course, because the dissertation wasn't going to pay my salary. I needed a job. So I worked, thankfully I was on a dissertation fellowship, and that allowed me the time to work on these applications. In an 8-week period, I applied for 90 jobs, and overall I applied for 120 so jobs, all around the country. Wasn't limiting myself to geography or region. It's like, who will hire me? It was that kind of search, a very wide net. Out of those 120, and this will give people listening a kind of a sense of where the job market is right now, at least for people looking to get into the profession of English professor. Out of those 120 so jobs, 13 interviews, some by Skype, some by phone, some that I was able to go to campuses. Of those 13, only 2 campus visits, which is kind of the last stage before, for the finalists. I came here, and I went to California University of Pennsylvania. And so I had those two campus visits, and then 1 job offer, which was here. And it just so happened that it was the best offer. The one tenure track job offer that I got out of 124 applications. Of course, all of those 124 or so weren't for tenure track jobs, but that was the only offer that I got. So it was a no-brainer. It was, I'm going there, and it's Southern California. So, all of these things, of course, were working in my favor, so I accepted the job kind of outright with very little negotiation, because it was the best opportunity, and I was lucky. Part of it was preparation. I put the time in, of course, but the other part of it was a good fit. So that's another thing that I think your listeners can take away from the job search. You don't have to be the best credentialed. I certainly wasn't. I was up against people, I hadn't published at that point. I have since, but I hadn't then. So I was up against people that had. I was up against people, I'm sure, that have published books already, that were far more advanced in their academic career. I hadn't done some of those things, but I was a better fit, I would say, for the department. At least that's the idea behind them hiring me, right? So some of it is based on what you've done. Some of it is based on your potential, what can you do? And the other part is, do they want to spend the next however many years working with you? Right? You need to be a good fit for the department that's hiring you. So that was a very tumultuous time. I got the job offer, accepted the job, and then rushed to finish the dissertation. I finished it, I defended, and I actually missed my second day of orientation here to go back to graduate. So, I barely made the deadlines for graduating, for getting the degree on time, because of course I couldn't start the job without the degree. It was part of the deal. I had to have the degree in hand to start the job. So luckily the timing, although kind of tight, it all worked out. And so I've been here now. This is the end of my second year. This was the fall of 2016 that I started and that I graduated.
I always ask my guests, where do you see yourself after retirement?
After retirement, that is such a long way away that it's hard to say. I've mentioned already the to-do list. And so I've been doing this for so long, I can't even envision a time when there isn't a to-do list. What do I enjoy other than the job, music, movies? So it would have to be something along those lines. Pop culture. So enjoying it, probably not creating it. I don't know if I'll have any energy at the time of retirement to do any kind of that work. But just filling my time with things that are enjoyable. Because this job is very satisfying in a number of ways, but it's like any other job. It can be a grind at times. And so the grind all the way to get to retirement is going to be exhausting, I'm sure. So it's just finding things that are enjoyable.
What would you like your legacy to be?
Legacy. If I could shape it, actively, because of course students will make of you what they want, right? You're kind of a cipher for whatever they think a professor is up at the front of the class. And what I try to impart to my students is the idea that there's value in the humanities. There's real, tangible value to the humanities. And I remind every student, every semester, I begin my class with some kind of speech on the value of the humanities. We're studying the human condition. And what is more important than that? And many people do. Many disciplines study the human condition. We just happen to study the human condition through literature. Why people write literature. Why do they feel compelled to write a poem about their feelings, for instance? Why do we make art in the first place? Why did we choose literature as the form of art, one form of art through which we express our lives? What is it about literature that explains, or how does literature rather explain the human condition? And that's kind of a lofty goal, but it's what we're doing in the literature classroom every day. So I want my legacy to be that, for students to understand that early and often, to get that point and to apply it to their own lives. And even if they don't go on to teach literature or study literature, the lessons are the same. It's the human condition, human beings, why we do the things we do, why we say the things we say, and how to analyze that is a lesson that students can take with them well past their time here.
Excellent. And we'll be right back after this quick break.
2 weeks, 50,347 people get federal paychecks from jobs that don't give them enough hours. Every week, another 8,749 people end up single. They live on their friends' couches, in basements, sometimes out of cars if they haven't been repossessed yet. For those lucky few that have that final paycheck in hand, They will probably spend it on some consumable item that may or may not send them away from sobriety. Many of these people are actors. Hi, my name is Marlon Bailey. I'm a theater critic. I also direct, help backstage, and in other capacities assisting the theater. I am also an actor.
Thank you everyone who's tuning in.
Dear
Pressing the
employer,
hearts.
I'm sorry we have
Pressing the
rehearsal
screen,
5 or
liking
6
the
nights a week
video
and
stream.
performance runs that
This
last
is
several
one of many
weekends.
video streams.
Significant other,
Camcorders.
we love being home with you. But that light that shines from our pores out on that stage is what makes us keep going. Don't hate us because we're passionate people. We're just doing what we love. None of the aforementioned statistics are true, but one thing that is that the theater needs your support. Go see a local production. Go see one abroad. A play, a musical, or even a staged reading. It doesn't matter if it's at a high
Thank you
school,
so
a
much
community
for the
center,
support.
or the largest venue
I can't
or
read that
Starbucks
language, but
riddled
thank you.
pretentious town. Whatever you do, support the theater. We need you.
People from all over tuning in, thanks.
What's up, everybody? This is the host of Flores.
Turkish language. Oh, cool, cool.
Tune in every Tuesday at 6 p.m. on 22 West Radio for some quality tunes.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Golden Spotlight. Yes, the show where every week I feature a new guest and have them share their story. Now, there is a big event coming up. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, so I'm here to help promote the 4th annual Elena Maria Viramontes, a very famous Chicana writer, annual lecture in Latina O literature. And this is the 4th year that we're putting this event on. We are going to feature the award-winning poet Aracelis Girmay, so people might be familiar with her, and that's Girmay, in case you want to look her up. And I'll just say briefly that her poetry, of course, is great. That's part of the reason why we're bringing her here. So to use all the cliched words that, yes, apply to her work, it's very powerful, it's very moving. Some people might be aware of that already. This is taking place Thursday, April the 12th, and we have a couple different events that people can come to. They're all open and free for the public. There is an author reception from 4:30 to 5:30 p.m. That's in the Carl Anatol Center. So come by if you want some free food, if you want to meet the author, and simply chat with other people interested in the theme of the lecture. And we have the public reading from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m., and that's at the University Theater. And that is where Girmay will present her work. From what I understand, she's going to give students some tips, some framework for understanding poetry, for writing poetry. And then, of course, she'll treat us to reading some of her own original poems, which would be great. So this is in part funded by California Humanities, so a thank you to them. And it's going to be a great event. Every year we host this, and we've had some really great artists come in the past. About 300 people or so attend every year, and we're looking to boost attendance. So if this interests you, if you love literature, if you love poetry, if you know Girmay's work, if you love Viramontes and her work, come and we'd be happy to see you.
Cool, cool. Tell us about the planning process that goes into all this.
Okay, so the planning process. There's a committee that's kind of formed ad hoc out of the Spanish program, the English department, and Chicano and Latino studies. And a side note for listeners who are thinking about becoming professors, committee work, committee work, committee work. It's 1/3 of the tripod usually in a professor's life. And so this is part of what I do with my committee work, and it's actually one of the more satisfying things because it's such a great event. So the planning that goes into this, we of course have to identify the guest artist, and then once we have that, we kind of work to get the venue straightened out. We have to get the food. Sometimes we order books, other kind of gifts for attendees. We have to create a website, for instance, which is something that I did, viramonteslecture.com, for people that want to check that out. So a lot of promotion on the website, on Twitter, at HMV Lecture, making flyers, making posters, putting those up, getting the word out, spreading the word by email, etc. So anything you can think of in terms of organizing an event, we do it. There's some special kind of things that we do also. We put on a creative writing workshop, so students here will get a chance every year to work with the author one-on-one. And so that's unfortunately, of course, not free and open to the public, but one of the added things that we do that I think makes the event special. So there's a lot of student participation, of course there's faculty participation, and all around it's a lot of work, but it's well worthwhile.
Cool, cool. So, the event, tell us again the website.
The website is www.viramonteslecture.com. So VIRAMONTES, that's the last name of the author, lecture.com. And all the event details are there. And you can also find us on Twitter at HMV Lecture.
Cool, cool. For those of you who are watching the video version.
Yes, we got a
Check it
very
out,
fancy
check it out.
poster. This is a shout out to Dennis Lopez from the English department. He's been making our flyers for the past, I think since the start of the lecture series, and he does a great job. So here's a very nice laminated version of the poster that we've been papering the walls with, basically, in the English department.
Cool, cool. This is every semester or every year?
This is every year. So every spring we put on this event, and it takes usually the entire calendar year to get the funding together and to get everything organized. So we are excited that this event is coming up, and we're relieved too that we'll get somewhat of a break over the summer months before we have to kind of gear up again for the next author. So yes, it happens every spring, and this is the 4th event that we're putting on in this lecture series.
I always like to think that, you never know who can be listening, and chances are there's someone listening and watching this show that they can relate to the particular guest. They want to achieve the same degree that the guest has, or the same career, similar career. What tips do you have for those aspiring students?
For aspiring writers that want to become basically someone in the future who can be invited to an event like this, this is what I tell my students. Actually, I haven't told them yet because I just thought of this over spring break, and it's kind of a slogan that I want to share with my students, and it applies to academic writing and applies to creative writing. The writing process is about discovery, but the writing product shouldn't show evidence of that discovery. What I mean by that is that writing is hard work. It's the first draft is never good enough, unless you're a genius of some sort, and that's rare. But the first draft is never good enough, but it's the first step. You need that to build off of. So for any student looking to write creatively or academically, that's what I would say. It's a craft. It's hard work. You need to shape your writing, you need to polish your writing, you need to work on your writing. It's called the writing process for a reason. And I think sometimes the idea with creative writing, why it maybe doesn't get as much credit as it deserves, is that people think, well, anyone can write a poem. I feel a certain way, and I'm gonna write a poem about how I'm feeling today. Certainly that's true. And poetry can serve that function for people who have that urge. But the best poetry and the best poets, I think, would agree. I'm not one of them, so it's strange speaking for them, but I think they would agree that that's only the first step. There's a craft to it. It takes discipline, and it takes practice, just like anything else, to get really good at it. So if you are inspired to write poetry, know that you can certainly do it. Anyone's capable of it, but just like any other type of writing, it's hard work. But again, it's hard work that's worthwhile, because what else can move us like poetry? It's kind of a quick way, kind of a shortcut to our emotions, poems are. And the best way to kind of prick people's emotions with that poem is to make it as perfect as you can make it. The core idea that you have on that first draft is usually compelling enough to take you through several drafts of the poem, but it's that final product. The seams are hidden, and it's as perfect as you can get it, that's what's really gonna get readers. Is that so? I would advise them to just think of it as a process. You need to go through that process to shape your idea in such a way to where you produce an effect on the reader.
How can people contact you?
People can, if they want to, email me directly. First name Rene, R-E-N-E, dot last name Trevino, Trevino, at csulb.edu. So that's my campus email. You can find me there. You can use the contact button at viramontes.com. And you can also tweet at me. I manage the Twitter account. You can tweet at me at HMV Lecture.
Cool, cool. Lastly, what tips do you have for those that they're changing their minds still a bunch of times, what they want to do in life?
Take heart, it's not too late. Basically, that's my own personal experience. It's okay that you're questioning if you're enjoying what you're doing, if you're thinking about changing paths. I would say put more thought into it than I did. I think that would benefit you in the long run. But it's okay to ask yourself those questions. Maybe everyone here on campus wants to be an English major. We're okay with that. Come see us at MHB. But if you're having any kind of doubts, they're normal. I mean, college is a period of growth, of discovery, of learning, and that applies in the classroom, but also outside of the classroom. You're starting to really understand what you like, what you're into, what you want to do basically for the rest of your life. And some people are fortunate that they're essentially born knowing that, but that's rare. Most of us, we have to discover it for ourselves. So if you have those questions, A, it's normal. B, just think about it carefully. Right? But it's never too late. It's never too late. I'm a little far behind, where I should be, but who's to say where any of us should be? It's all about our kind of personal path and the peace that we make with it. So it might be a hard decision, but if it's for you the right decision, then make it.
Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to be here on the Golden Spotlight.
Thank you for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes this episode. Until next time, folks. Yes, check out the poster.